the tribe of Rasulullah, the Bani Hashims, also have a share of this 20%. Wal yatama, the yatims, the orphans, wal masakin, and also the destitute, the poor people of Rasulullah's family. The people who are poor, who cannot live, who do not have enough subsistence, who do not have enough to live on, they are also capable of taking a share from this 20%. And then wabn as-sabil, meaning those people who are from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they also have a share from this, those who are the travelers. Those people who are the travelers also, they may well have lots of money when they're back home, but they found themselves in a dire situation whilst traveling. They also have a share of khums. And also, I will inshallah present to you the hadith regarding this subject. I will also present the Quran, the translations of the Quran, what the Mufassirin have written regarding this ayah in the Quran, and why it was stopped, and then our two branches of Islam, the Sunnis and the Shias, how they differed regarding khums. Why was it then that the ulama of ahlul sunnah wal jama'at ignored this Qurani ayat? They ignored this Qurani ayat, saying that this ayat was a specialization only for the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. So we have immediately after Rasulullah's passing away a conflict brewing already. We had the events of Saqifa, we then have the events of Fadr. Then with Fadr, as I said before, little is mentioned of Khums. And if you read in the Siyasita, meaning the Sunni 6 authentic books, in those books you will find this chapter on Fadr. Fadr has been mentioned 6 times in Bukhari. The issue of Fadr in different chapters has been mentioned 6 times in Bukhari. And even in Muslim and the other 4 books, they have mentioned it in different chapters. And Bukhari has a chapter called Bab al-Khums, the chapter of Khums. And if you think about this, why is it that Bukhari has created a whole chapter on Khums, and yet this Khums, according to the majority of Muslims today, that this Khums was only a temporary thing during the time of Rasulullah. It was limited for his time period only. And inshallah, over the coming days, I will show to you that this was not. It was not a temporary thing. It was not a temporary ayat of the Quran. It is today in the Quran. This ayah exists in the Quran, and there is no ayah which actually cancels this ayat out. There's no mansukh ayah which cancels this ayah out. Because in order to cancel an ayat of the Quran, it has to be, something has to exist in the Quran for it to be cancelled. Hadith cannot cancel out the injunction of an ayat of the Quran. I hope that makes it absolutely clear. You cannot cancel out an ayat of the Quran with a hadith. It has to be an injunction from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which cancels out the implication, the application and the obligation of any ayat of the Quran. So what? Now, I also know that even some Shias object. Do they object of the Qurani ayah? No. They don't object to the ayat of the Quran. They object to this principle. And inshallah, over the days coming, I will answer this as well. If this ayat of the Quran, verse number 41 of Surah Anfal, if this ayat of the Quran is applicable today, then the Sayyids of today, they are regarded as royal family then. They then have a special quality which gives them this right of 20% of the income that which we save, and the profit which you have made, 20% goes to the Sayyids. Does not this contradict the Qurani, the Islami, Rasulullah's principle of justice? Does it not mark contradiction of what Islam came for, equality, when the Quran has said, Innama akrama indallahi atqakum, in the eyes of Allah, He is the most honored, He is the most honored who has taqwa. And yet this khums is something which the Sayyids have, and the Shias obey this law, and they give their khums to the poor Sayyids. And inshallah, I will address this issue, and I will prove to you that it is no way in contradiction to the Islamic concept of equality. This is a big challenge. And then, regarding the actual word of ghanimtum, how do the dictionaries of Islamic terminologies actually describe the word ghanimtum? Is it only war spoils, war booty? And if this word amongst the Arabs during the time of Rasulullah, how did they understand this word? Did they understand this word purely as spoils of war? Or did they understand it the way today the Shias understand it? That it is actually anything which you have earned in your business, in your livelihood, or even in your occupation. And where did khums actually originate from? Was it this Qurani ayat of Surah Anfal, verse number 41, which is the first indication of khums? Or did khums originate somewhere even before this ayah of the Quran? And inshallah, over the days, I will show to you that this actually is something which originated even before this ayah of the Quran was revealed. So, you have two taxes in Islam, and one is zakat, everybody knows. Zakat. Khums is the least talked about of the taxes in Islam. Why? It's because there's only one mention in the Quran of khums. There's only one mention of the word khums regarding this concept, only once in the Quran. So, can we say, because it's been mentioned once, it is not sufficient for it to be applied? No. Once is sufficient. Why does Allah have to say over and over again? Once is sufficient. Once is sufficient. And we will prove to you, inshallah, that this once is enough to make a law of Islam. And then we have to then look towards those people who know the Quran, the ahlul bayt. Because how can we impose upon the family of Rasulullah something which even they do not know about? Now, what do I mean by this? If the family of Rasulullah say that khums is something which is an obligation that we deserve, it is our right, surely any family knows better exactly what their status is in their family. This ayah of the Quran was revealed in favor of the ahlul bayt regarding khums, regarding who is going to have this khums. Then is I want you to look at the wording of this ayah of the Quran as well. Just put it for a moment at the back of your mind, because inshallah this will come up later on during the course of this discussion. It says, be it known, وَأَعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَأَنَّا لِلَّهِ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ. You have 6 categories. 6 categories. Now, Allah Himself does not collect khums. Has anybody seen Allah collecting khums? No. Allah does not collect khums Himself. Who collects khums? Who collects khums? It is Rasulullah, who is His messenger, who collects khums on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have already at the beginning of the ayah a delegation of responsibility. When one person is not present, meaning Allah Himself is not present to collect the khums Himself in person, so what do? You give it to Rasulullah. And then Rasulullah then disperses the khums. And then this is where it gets a bit tricky. What happens when Rasulullah is not here? Who then controls khums? And this is a debate amongst the Shias as well. Some Shia say that because Rasulullah has passed away, why is it that this khums is now divided into 2 sections? You know, those who give khums, there's 2 parts. We call it semi-imam and semi-sadat, meaning the share of the imam and the share of the sadat. So if you have £1,000 which you have given in khums, £500 is given to who? To the naib of the imam, which is our marja. And there's an objection which some Shias raise upon this issue as well, and inshallah I will try to address this as well. And then the other half is given to the Sayyids, and you have authority. You have an authority to dispense of this khums, which is the share of the Sayyids, to the poor Sayyids. I'm not talking about the Sayyids who have nice cars. I'm not talking about the Sayyids who have wealth. I'm talking about those Sayyids who are destitute, who are poor, who do not have a form of livelihood. I'm talking about those Sayyids who are yatim. I'm talking about those Sayyids who are on journeys but have found difficulties during their journey. So, out of your £1,000, £500 goes to the marja, and then £500 goes towards the poor Sayyids. And you can dispense of this yourselves. If you know any Sayyids who are poor, you can give this amount by yourselves. So, after discussing all these related pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, then there's another issue. If this is going to be a discussion on khums, there has to be a chapter in this discussion which actually talks about the implication of giving khums, and also on what is khums apply to. On what 7 things does khums apply to? We know, because this is something which was related to those who give khums, is that it is upon all our earnings. We know this. And we also know from the Qurani ayat, it is also the spoils of war. We know this from the Quran. And we know that the earnings, the business that we indulge in, and after a year, the profits that we made, out of those profits, 20% goes to khums. These are 2. Then, if you are involved in diving meaning that you go into the sea, you dive. Some people do this for a living. And if you find any treasures, like pearls, khums has to be paid on that. And then if you are a miner, you mine, and you find some gold, you find some silver, then you have to give khums on this as well. And then you have to give khums on that which is halal, your earnings, or haram, and both have been mixed. your haram earnings and your halal earnings, and you cannot differentiate which is haram and which is halal, then you have to give khums in order to make that pure. Now I will talk about these different aspects of what khums is applied upon, and also one more which I forgot is also finding a treasure. For example, if you were digging up your garden and you found some wealth, some treasure in there, before the government gets to you, khums will get to you. Khums is applicable upon any treasure trove. 20% is given from any treasure which is found. And these are the 7 items upon which khums is applicable. And inshallah, I will talk about the main things which are concerned with our daily living. None of us are miners. None of us are divers. None of us are treasure hunters. So those things, spoils of war will be talked about, and earnings will be talked about, and obviously halal being mixed with haram as well. This is something which often has been discussed, and inshallah I will discuss this towards the end of these lectures. Now, I was hoping that a few Marsi Akhwans will be here as well, but unfortunately today they have not turned up. Maybe they were suffering under the weather, and inshallah I have allowed myself between 25 to 30 minutes every day, and inshallah within this time frame I will try to cover the subjects which I have just mentioned. Now I will introduce our speaker who has come from India, Maulana Misamzadi, who has travelled from India, and inshallah he will be conducting the 10 days of Muharram. And before I start, a very poignant point I want to make. This is now nothing to do with the topic which I've talked about, but this is something which regarding today. Today marks the 1st of Muharram. The 1st of Muharram, a moon has been sighted, and today marks the 1st day of Muharram. And in a few days' time, on Wednesday night, people the world over will be commemorating their new year. And they will be commemorating it in their own ways. They will be celebrating, they will be merry making, they will be enjoying themselves. But Islam is unique in that sense, that the world over, both Sunni and Shia, they remember the 1st of Muharram with sorrow and with grief and with majalises and with zikr, and everybody commemorating this tragedy of Karbala in their own way. And in a short period of time from the passing away of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a period of 50 years had only passed when the Muslims deemed it necessary to kill and to butcher the family of Rasulullah. And this is the reason why the world over, that we as Shias and the Sunnis as well, they all commemorate this very painful occasion in history. And maybe some of the things which I will mention during the course of these 10 days will touch upon some of the topics of Karbala as well, and how at the very outset of history of Islam things did not go right. Because if things had gone right, it would not have been necessary for Imam Hussain alayhi salam to rise up against Yazid in order to protect Islam, to give Islam a new life. So within a period of 2 generations, 50 years, Islam needed this great sacrifice. And this is the reason why we gather every year. Every year we gather to commemorate this great martyrdom of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And any sacrifice and the effects that sacrifice has is proportional. It's proportional to the level of sacrifice given. For this sacrifice is remembered 1400 years after this great event, which shows that this sacrifice was no just ordinary sacrifice, but this sacrifice was unique in the history of Islam. For we believe that Mawla Ali was also martyred. Mawla Ali was also martyred in Masjid al-Kufa. We also believe Imam Hassan was also martyred by giving poison. But why is it that the Karbala event is remembered the world over? And inshallah, Maulana will no doubt touch upon the subject, and in passing I will touch upon this subject as well. अब मैं गुजारिश करता हूँ हमारे मेहमान खुसूसी क़िबला व काबा मिस मज़ादी साहब से कि मंबर को और अफरोज़ करूँ और हमारा मुहम्मदिन व आलिहि तय्यबीन अत्ताहिरीन अल-मासूमीन वल्लानु अला आदाइहिम अजमाइन मिन आदावतिहिम इला क़ियाम यौमिद्दीन अम्मा बअद फ़क़द क़ाल अल्लाह सुब्हानहु व तआला फ़ी किताबिहिल मजीद वल फ़ुरक़ानिल हमीद बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम वअलमू अन्नमा गनिमतुम मिन शैइन फ़अन्न लिल्लाहि ख़ुमुसहु व लिरसूलिहि व लिज़िल क़ुर्बा वल-यतामा वल-मसाकीन वब्न अस्सबील सदक़ल्लाहुल अलीयुल अज़ीम व सदक़ रसूलुहुन नबियुल अमीनुल करीम सल्लल्लाहु I have read and recited in front of you. I've had the honor of reciting Surah Anfal, verse number 41. Translated, it means, be it known that the war booties, that's the spoils of war, are for Allah and His Messenger and the close relatives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the orphans and the poor and those who are wayfarers, the travelers from this family. And yesterday I said I was going to talk about some of the aspects of this ayah of the Quran, and to fully understand this Khums concept I have to talk about some other related issues in order to completely cover this topic the way it should be. And one thing which sometimes comes to mind is, why is it that when we have speakers on the minbar or people like myself who have the opportunity to speak to the Mu'mineen, why do we give Sunni references? It's a fair question. Why do I always say, right, it is written in Bukhari, it is written in Muslim? There is a law of called judicial evidence, the laws of evidence. And when a solicitor cross-examines an opponent, he always tries to get the opponent to agree with his stance. Because then the element of refutation, meaning that he does not object to what has been agreed upon. So if the opponent can tell you exactly what you want the judge to hear, then he does not have to present his own evidence. He may well have his own evidence to present to the judge. But if the opponent is saying exactly what you want him to say, so you don't have to present your own evidence. And this rule is basically accepted in law courts all over the world. If your opponent can tell the judge what you want the judge to hear, why give your own evidence? We have our own evidence. That's not to say that the Shias have nothing on this subject. We have many hadiths from the Imams, and it becomes somewhat pointless to quote these when we have our opponents actually quoting what we want to present. Now, regarding Khums, I said yesterday that this subject has to be looked upon both historically, politically, the need of Ahlul Bayt, and how did the Ahlul Bayt regard Khums. Now, as you are all aware, we have, mashallah, in our own community many Sayyids, and even Sayyids today, they regard taking of zakat and sadaqah as haram. Today, they regard taking sadaqah and zakat as haram. Now, this comes from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. So, if sadaqah and zakat are haram on the family of Rasulullah, then what is their recourse to public funds if they become poor? If you cannot take zakat, so how are they meant to live? So Allah has punished them for being a Sayyid, that because you are from the family of Rasulullah, you cannot take zakat, you cannot take sadaqah, die in poverty and die in hunger. Is that justice? Is that what Allah has meted out to the family of Rasulullah? No. Allah, I said yesterday, this concept which is held by some people that the Sayyids are a privileged people because they have Khums available to them as a resource. No. This is the equality which Allah has meted out to all people. People like us, the non-Sayyids, they have recourse to public funds, zakat. And if this was an Islamic state, then the people who are poor, they can actually come and get public funds, meaning zakat. However, a Sayyid cannot. So Allah, in His infinite wisdom, and through the dua of Rasulullah, there is a hadith regarding this. Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib, he said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasul, let me collect the zakat. Let me collect zakat, and because I will be a collector of zakat, then I will be able to take some money, because the collectors of zakat were allowed to take money for themselves. This is one of the rulings which the Quran has allowed. The people who collect zakat, they can actually take money for their wages when they're collecting zakat. And Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib actually asked Rasulullah, can I also be a collector of zakat and take from this zakat? Rasulullah said no. The Hashimis are not allowed to take zakat, but I will make a dua. And the dua is this ayah, that Allah has ordained for the Sayyids this Khums. So, this is the equality of Islam. I talked about yesterday. Is this a superiority? No, this is equality. Because the Sayyids are not allowed from zakat, they are allowed from Khums. It is balanced. They don't have sources they can take from zakat, they can take from Khums. This is the balance. Allah has achieved this balance. This is the equality which Islam has ordained. And then, with the passing of Rasulullah, this is a concept held by the majority of Muslims. With the passing of Rasulullah,